Hey guys, it's Rachel coming back for another of the YouTube Pagan Challenge video prompts. This time I'm working on prompt number 6, which is, what kind of divination techniques do you prefer? And do you record your divination results in your grimoire? So I mentioned in my last video, which talked about witchy talents and magical specialties, about the fact that I think my strongest divination skill is tarot. And so I thought I would start out this video kind of showing off the decks that I have and, doing a little bit of a show and tell in that sense. So I have them all here on the desk with me. The first one, this little gold bag here, I have the Wildwood Tarot. And this one is not really a traditional tarot deck. See if this will... Oh, the glare from my lamp is awful. There we go. See a little bit better. And basically, this one tends to change some of the names of like the major arcana and that sort of deal. So like the Hermit here. Sorry, I'm like trying to get the hang of this camera angle and there we go. So like the Hermit in this deck is the Hooded Man. I mean, it's got a lot of the same sort of imagery, but some of the names are different. On the minor arcana here, you can see like the 10 of arrows, and next to it, it says instruction. So they have little like keywords at the bottom that kind of give you sort of a feel for the vibe that they're going for on the deck. This is another of my favorite ones. Instead of justice, you have the Wood Ward. And so he's got this kind of, guardian of the forest and wildlife kind of vibe. And this is probably one of the older decks that I have. I got it a few years back when I first was looking into druidry. And I tend to use this one specifically when I'm working on questions dealing with some of like the wild hunt issues and that sort of deal. They've got this really pretty dark green back. Mine are a little beat up because they're probably at least 4 years old at the very least. So this is basically kind of my, go-to wild hunty and, nature spirituality specifically kind of decks that I use. The other old one that I have, it's in a Crown Royal bag because tarot bags can be really darn expensive, and when your mom has a million Crown Royal bags, you just take what you get. So the next one, I'm not going to show that card. The next one is the Druidcraft Tarot. These are enormous cards, and I notice that people like to comment that every time I read with them. This has got more of the feel of like a traditional deck, so you've got, most of the major arcana are pretty much named the same thing. I think the exception would be like, instead of the devil, they have Cernunnos, if I could find him. He's in here somewhere, guys. I should have looked for him before I started making this video, But, stuff happens, and, well, what can you do? Okay, well, I can't find it at the moment. Because, there he is. So instead of the devil, you have Cernunnos kind of brooding in the background over the sleeping couple, or like instead of the world, it's titled Rebirth. But I mean, for the most part, it's pretty much the same sort of a feel here. These cards are by the same artist actually as the Wildwood Tarot, Will Worthington, and I love his artwork for these decks. They are probably some of my favorites. This deck is typically the one that I use if I'm giving a bunch of readings, either when I'm working at a witchy shop back in Bay City, or if I'm, at a party somewhere. I tend to bring this deck because it's a little less abstract and has a very kind of like mundane, earthy feel. And so typically when you're doing a lot of readings for other people. They're not always going to be witches. They're not always going to be witchy folk. And so they tend to ask about things like finances, love life, that sort of deal. And so the really physical, earthy, human-centered aspect of these cards really kind of makes that an easy deck for me to use for that sort of thing. I like it a lot more for that than the next deck I'm going to show you. Sorry, pendulums flying everywhere. And so the next deck I have here is the Secrets of the Hidden Realm Tarot. And I bought it kind of on a whim one summer. I think it was the summer I was working in the witchy shop, to be completely honest. And it's got this kind of Celtic fairy vibe to it. This is the Page of Cups here. And I really like this deck, and this is another deck that I tend to use when giving readings for other people. But I've had a hard time recently connecting with it as much, just because it's kind of very bright and whimsical, and you don't have a whole lot of like image. You have this very like close-up view of a person, and so you have to have a kind of, I feel anyway, you have to have this sort of like vibe for reading people and what they're telling you, and sometimes that's not always easier for me than having the big, full, colorful picture of, say, the Druidcraft Tarot. So these are the backs of them. They've got this really cool swirly design. My only criticism is that you can always tell when one is reversed, and so that kind of bums me out a little bit, but I really like the design on these. The aces on all of these are animals, so this is the Ace of Wands. You have this really gorgeous fox there. So it's a deck that I've been working with on and off, but it's not one that I've clicked with a ton. And last but not least, if you've gotten a reading from me either through the full moon services or just because you know me in real life and went, hey Rachel, give me a reading, you've probably seen these. These are the Raven's Prophecy Tarot, and I bought these this past summer mostly because I'd wanted the Wild Unknown, and it was before I had known that the Wild Unknown was now going to be more widely produced and therefore more easily purchased. But they had a kind of similar feel to it. They were kind of got this like blurry, like I think it's pastels or colored pencils, I can't quite tell, but that kind of like blurry quality to them. They're not a clear, crisp picture, and they kind of cause you to dive into some of like what they're trying to get you to feel on a psychological level. At least that's how I've experienced them. And they're just really colorful and pretty and vibrant, and they've clicked with me a lot. And so this has been my main deck for the past several months here, almost a year. And yeah, so you'll see a lot of this deck. This is the deck that I tend to like post tarot pictures of and to use in my readings because it's the one that I've been vibing with the most. The backs of them have this really cool print here with all of the different little sketchy symbols. Again, you can tell when one is reversed, so I don't tend to read reversals with this deck. Really, my policy with tarot and reversals is basically dependent on the deck. If I can tell right away when I draw a card, like, oh no, this is reversed, usually that deck is no longer one that I read reversals with, just because I like that sort of element of surprise when I flip the card over. I like to be able to, not know exactly what I'm drawing until it's drawn. So the Druidcraft and Wildwood Tarot, I do read reversals on, and I don't have like a specific like method for those. Sometimes if I feel the vibe, I'll just flip them over like, oh no, this isn't supposed to be this way. I think that my policy on reversals as far as tarot goes as a divination method is pretty much just personal preference and kind of what you're feeling in the moment and with the particular deck and reading and that kind of deal. So yeah, that is those. I also have a couple of oracle decks that I use from time to time. I should have unwrapped this first. I have this one wrapped up in like a bandana here because I, again, don't have enough tarot bags. It's too many decks, not enough bags. So this deck is really special to me. I purchased this when I went and studied abroad in the UK for a month several summers ago. And it's Brian Froud's The Heart of Fairy Oracle. And I have been a very big fan of Brian Froud for a very long time. Those of you who know me well know that I love Labyrinth, and he, of course, was the, one of the major artists that worked on that film. So this deck is kind of cool. It really focuses a lot more on, like, relationships and your interactions with other people and that kind of thing. So it's kind of got, like, its specific purposes, but I really love this deck. It's got gorgeous artwork, and I got it, again, really cheaply in Glastonbury when I was studying abroad, and had been looking for something, really witchy to take home with me, and that was one of the things that I found in one of the shops and went, this is it. This is something that I need. Like, it's Brian Froud, and I found it in you don't have those moments too often. These are the backs, and they're just super gorgeous. They kind of remind me of, does anyone remember that anime, like Card Captor? And she had, like, the tarot card thing. It's kind of what they remind me of, with, like, the red hearts and the wings and all that. But so yeah, this is one of my other, decks that I have around. And then last deck I'm showing you, I promise. I also have the Wisdom of Avalon Oracle, and these backs look like this. And these I got from my friend Mark as a gift several summers ago. I think he had actually gotten them and then had given them to me for one reason or another, but I haven't used these in a long time, and kind of just looking back at them is giving me all sorts of nostalgia. But really cool deck. It has a lot of, like, Celtic symbolism in them, that kind of deal, and so I've really, enjoyed this in the past. This is something else that I would typically use if I was giving readings for other people, just because it's kind of like a, very open, like, it's a very welcoming kind of deck. It's something that people aren't really, like, scared off by and that kind of thing. And again, my last video, I showed you my little scrying mirror here, which is just this little dark brown agate disc. And again, I'm not really that great at, scrying into the mirror and seeing images that way. It doesn't work for me really very often at all. So this one, when I scry with it, I tend to, bless and empower it and then leave it underneath my pillow. And usually whatever vision that might come based on that tends to come in the form of a dream or, something that happens in, like, a meditation, that kind of deal. So that's something that I just picked up doing this past summer, and it's been really interesting. Some other fun things I have here, I have pendulums. My mom and I are both really good at getting pendulums to swing and, like, using the energy and that sort of deal. So this is, like, a little amethyst one that I got as a Yule gift a couple years ago. It's got this little moon charm. So it's pretty. Very pretty. So there's that one. And then I also have another one. I think it's actually supposed to be one of those, like, ceiling fan pulls, but it works pretty well as a pendulum too. And this is carved out of deer antler. And a friend of mine, or a former friend of mine, had found it at a craft fair and went, like, Rachel would really love this as a pendulum. So I have a little antler. It's supposed to be a light pull, but again, I use it as a pendulum. It works pretty much, I think most of it's just intent. Does it swing? Does it have that same sort of motion? Did you charge it to be a pendulum? Then yes, of course it is a pendulum. And for a while, I think I have a video on, like, one of my old YouTube channels about these. I wanted to get into reading Ogham staves as a divinatory practice, so I had, like, the little OM symbol there, and then the Gaelic and English name of it. There was like the letter that it represented, and then I had some like keywords and phrases that it was associated with. So this particular one was honeysuckle, and the keywords I had on it were secrets, hidden things, revelations, insight, subtle or small details. And so they're kind of, something that I would just have drawn out of the bag that I had. This is like aspen right here. And they're neat. They really are. I've never like connected with them quite as well. I'm a very visual person, so I found that tarot and oracle cards really tend to work the best for me, because just a tiny symbol sometimes isn't enough of an answer, and I don't ask a lot of yes, no, or pendulum-y type questions. So I found that tarot is probably the best as far as divination methods for me. As far as recording them, I mentioned back in my other Book of Shadows video and that sort of a thing that I do indeed record some of the readings that I do. I think, let me see if I might have one here. Like, I know that I've recorded some spreads, so like this is one that I found from Jesse Huntenberg, and I used it for a full moon or new moon ritual back a few months ago. And I do tend to record, yes, on the other page there I have my responses to it. So I do indeed record the tarot readings that I do, at least for myself. I don't always transfer them into my big Book of Shadows. If they feel particularly important, or if I feel that they were, something significant had come up in them, or if they were part of a ritual that I had done, they usually end up in that bigger book. Otherwise, they just stay in my, little notebooks that I carry around. And I do that especially because if I go, oh, hey, I think something like this came up in a reading a few months ago, I can always go back and look at them. And it's really interesting, especially if you do like yearly rituals, yearly tarot readings, or even monthly or anything like that, looking at the patterns of what sorts of things come up, or looking at, hey, did this come to pass? Or how did I interpret this then? And how did it manifest itself? All those sorts of things. So that is my little spiel about my divination practices. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and blessed be, guys.